What's up, motherfuckers? Hans Niemann, after two losses in a row, yesterday he finally managed to win again against Awonder Liang in a endgame of the Berlin defense. So let's see how to play the Berlin because Niemann plays so good this game. Okay, first the Berlin was with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6. That's the Berlin defense. And now Niemann goes for the principal line, who is the endgame. So castle, 94, d4, 96, bishop c6, bc6, d5, knight f5, queen d8, and king d8. Okay, let's understand a little bit this endgame. We saw that black have the bishop pair with the black principal advantage, and in counter of that, white have a better constructor, but the most important that the black king is in the center and cannot be castled. If this king can be castled, the black position was perfectly. But the huge problem of black position is that the king cannot be castled. The king is going to have some problems in the center. And white plan here is going to be just create a pass pawn in the, not a pass pawn, but just push the pawn in the king side. Of course, it's well known that if in this position all the pieces were traded and we reach a king's endgame, the position is winning. And if we reach a knight's endgame, the position is winning too. Okay, I could do half an hour explaining more things about the Berlin defense. Maybe one day I'm going to make one video more ambitious, only explaining how to play the Berlin and which pieces trade, which pieces not trade, typical plans. But okay, in this game is about to show us the Nieman's game, who plays so good. So I hope that you are going to learn so much what's in this game. Okay, here Niemann goes to h3, with h3. Here knight c3 was the other normal move. Okay, Niemann playing the following move. 3 was typical. The idea was eject this knight with d4 and try to take space in the king side, with the side where white have more pawns. And of course, black should take space in the queen side with his pawn if he can, of course. Okay, king e8, knight c3. And here I prefer a little bit the move h5. I think that is slightly better just avoiding g4. Of course, you should know a little bit of theory, but I think that g5 was stronger stopping g4. Okay, Awonder goes with h6, so it's a good move. Rook d1. So the three are the three typical moves for white. Rook d1, knight c3, sorry, knight c3 and h3 are the typical move for white to start the Berlin. But here, Awonder choose a strange move with bishop e7. The bishop goes to e7 always when the pawn is on h5. Now, when you play h5, the idea is bishop e7, and that's the typical setup. But with the pawn on h6, uh, the idea of a6 used to be to play knight e7 followed by knight g6 because just the knight is a little bit better on g6 because on f5 white can go on tempos attacking with g4 and something like that, and the knight on g6 was well placed. But that's the idea of g6. I play knight e7 and knight g6. Mix a6 with bishop e7, both moves are fine, but mixed together I don't like so much. Okay, Niemann plays d4, great move, taking space in the king side, knight h4, trade, and after the king e2, and white is slightly better here. But this is especially because in this type of lines, the pawn should go on h5 in the lines with bishop e7. Here he makes many things who is not the best. So yes, king g2 here was the best option. Instead of that, he goes with bishop e3. No, sorry, he goes with king g2. Sorry, bishop e3 was other option. King g2 and our rooks on the d5. By the way, king g2 was a good move. Just putting together the pieces. And here I prefer a little bit king e7, but okay. Awonder goes with bishop e7. And now Niemann makes a good move, knight e2, just to improve the knight. And the knight is so the best square for the knight was just e4, where he can attack h5 after a possible h5, or he's attacking e5, he's threatening to push e5, 6 with the pawn. One thing that I didn't told is that the e5 pawn is like a small, it's not a weakness for white, but it's in the same color that this bishop. So in some lines are blockading a little bit the bishop. And apart, this blockading the open center files to attack the black king. So if you sometimes manage to trade this pawn, could benefit white. depends in this case, of course. Here, Liang goes with h5, who is not the best. Okay, now we are seeing that the Awonder Liang yes, strategy is failing a little bit because now he moved twice the pawn in the opening, he moved three times the bishop, bishop e7, bishop h4, bishop e7, but especially this strange loss of tempo, h6, h5 was strange. Here f5 was better. Of course, I thought that the e pawn sometimes benefits black because it's blockading the lighter square, the darker square bishop. But in this time it was better for black just um, play like this to can develop the bishop. For example, now the king can go to f7, so that's necessary for black to can develop a little bit the pieces. Or b6 was a normal move, but h5 just f3 will move defending the pawn. Of course, you can never take here because rook take and now the h3 pawn is so weak. So f3, of course, good move. a5, a4. Two typical moves, not allowing black to take space in the queen side. And here Awonder makes another also strange move with rook a6. In the Berlin, the rook doesn't go to a6. It's not a square for the rook. Simply rook a6 in the Berlin, not used to be logical. Instead of that, again, f5 was the best. Just breaking the position and trying to open the position for the bishops. Because okay, you have the bishop pair, you should open the position. F5. Here, of course, Niemann in all the lines have the advantage, but with f5 it's less easy to Niemann. He takes, and here, for example, bishop f4 or just rook e1 and white have the advantage here. But after rook a6 was so critical for Awonder. Now, very good move of Niemann, knight f4, attacking h5 and obligating black to take on g4. H takes. Now let's see that the h5 is open to attack with the rook, and the rook is completely misplaced on e6. I don't understand this move. For that reason, I don't like bishop e7 here. I think that was better just king 7 to can develop the bishop and trade one pair of rooks on the 8. So this was one of the main problems of black in the Berlin with the rooks who cannot be castled. But if with black you manage to trade rooks on the d5, you are going to be fine. Rook a6, knight f4, move h take, and now yes, well, we have the h5 to open. c5 will move, of course, trying to gain with the rook to defense. The problem of c5 is that gives white the move the square d5 for the knight. That's the problem of the rook a6 plan. To activate the rook, you should play c5 and this gives the d5 square for the knight. Bishop d8, bishop f4, good move. Niemann was playing perfectly until here. Um, Rook e6, blockading e6, and now rook h1, trying to enter in the h file. Of course, Awonder should avoid that because he cannot trade. Because after that, the rook is entered on the h file, so for that reason he maintained one pair of rooks. Best decision. And now bishop g3, good move of Has Niemann. The idea is just before f5. That's that could be the idea of white, of course. That's why he played bishop g3. And c4 here was fine. So that was the other good move. Example, bishop d7, b3, c6. It's like it's also similar like the game. Knight c3, f6, rook e1, bishop c7, knight d4, e6, and bishop g3. And white is winning, but okay, this is so similar like the game. He goes with bishop g3 first, now c4, and b3. C6. Okay, now white is winning with 93 or with 93, 93. And Niemann said 93, but okay, 93 was slightly better according to the machine. Now f4, f5 is coming. By the way, he goes with 93, who is still winning. Bishop c7, rook e1, rook d8. And until here, Niemann was playing with 100% of precision. But now, okay, Niemann in this move make a small inaccuracy, but two moves later he makes a huge mistake. But until here, Niemann is playing perfectly. Okay, I'm going to show us how the machine says. I'm not used to show us the machine, but here, let's see that the machine say uh, like +2. Yes, this is a +2 position, completely winning. Decisive advantage. Okay, I'm going to take off the machine. Okay, um, 93. Good move by Niemann. No, the white plan is just f4, f5. If white managed to play f4, f5, white is completely winning. Bishop c7, rook a1, king d8. Here, okay, yes. Rook h7 is not the best move, but okay, it's not bad. Here, 94 was stronger. Bishop e5 and 95. I don't know if maybe Niemann was a little bit annoyed for the exchange sacrifice, but okay, I think that this should be winning for white. But he maybe was, I don't know what happened. But okay, rook a7 looks a logical move. King c8, now 94, rook e7. And here, Niemann plays knight f2, who is the first mistake of this game. And maybe the only, no, not the only, but yes, the first mistake. Okay, now I told that if white plays f4, f5, he's just winning. And for that reason, he played knight f4 to defend g4 because now you cannot play g4 because the g4 pawn is hanging. But there are better ways of defend the g4 pawn without go back with the knight. For example, king h3 was stronger. Now the plan was f4, f5, and go with the knight to g5. And if you want, you can play rook g5, for example, defending e5. Or rook h4, defending g4. But my favorite move was king h3, defending g4 and followed by f4, f5. Here the move knight f2 I don't like because um, yes, you're going back with the knight when the knight will go to g5. There are better, more active ways to defend the g4 pawn. And the specific problem of the move knight f2 is that here black can react with f5. That's a huge problem. And white cannot take because the rook is hanging. That's why I don't like knight f2. Okay, for that reason, I wonder Liang play f5, of course. Here g5, we move, rook f8, threatening f4, bishop f4, bishop e8, we move, rook. Okay, here king g3 was slightly better. He must play rook h1, bishop g6. Again, king g3 was slightly better. He goes with knight h3. And here, Awonder makes the decisive mistake, avoiding the move e6. And here, black should have played rook f8, attacking e5. Black is going to take on e5, so white should leave the pawn, e6, bishop d8, because it's not the knight is landing on f4. For example, if you try to trade here, trade, and just rook h8, and white is here completely winning. The g6 bishop is also bad. Okay, black have an extra pawn, but it's this double pawn, so it doesn't make nothing. So here, bishop d8 was the best response. Niemann in the analysis, in the post-game analysis, he commented bishop g3. But he means that here black have a great move to try to defend with f4. If not, if black doesn't play f4, white is just winning. But after f4, the position is more or less equal. And knight f2 here was the option to go to this room. But instead of that, Awonder made the decisive mistake with rook d8. The huge problem of this move is that he avoids e6, and of course, with the rook on e8 after e6, you have the square bishop d8 to the entry bishop and not allow the knight of h3 to activate to f4. The problem of rook d8 is that now the knight is coming to f4. And rook d4, okay, he plays bishop takes, and king g3, preparing knight f4, and yes, white is just winning. And let's see about this. This pawn is so strong too, and this bishop is completely missed. Bishop e8, knight f4, finally landing the knight. And here, okay, I wonder just knight g5, and after he takes, he resigns. It can look strange that here I wonder resigns in a position with the same pawns, but it's simply that black have no active move. The rook have no moves in on e8. This bishop have no moves. Uh, and yes, well, what you can do with black, you cannot move the pawn. He move the only pawn that he can, but after it takes, you can recapture because 95. So for that reason, black here resigns because white have a completely domination of the position. Yeah, the rook have no moves, the bishop have no moves. The rook, what you can do with only one rook. Go to d6, then to d2, to d2. I don't know. And meanwhile, white is going to play, for example, rook e8, rook h8 or something. For example, if black just moves the king, rook h8, king c7, rook e5. And yes, and you just go here, I can take here, rook f8, and the position is completely win. Or for example, let's see if black here goes to rook d2, for example, rook h8, rook b2, congratulations, rook e5, rook b3, rook f5, and then for example, rook f8. So, or here you can just defend the pawn, like the normal persons, and just say white is completely win. So for that reason, Wonder here plays b5, and after he takes, he resigns because of the huge domination of Hans Niemann. I really like how Niemann played this endgame. I think that he plays in a very good way. And the Awonder Liang mistakes are so instructive to learn how not to play the Berlin's endgame. For example, the rook on a6 doesn't goes. The pawn on a6 is to play knight e7, knight g6, not to play bishop e7. And those are the huge mistakes of Awonder. The rook a6, and then yes, here majority rook a6 was a wrong plan, but very good gaming of Hans Niemann. Now after 9 rounds, only 2 rounds left for the end, and Fabiano Caruana is in the top of the standing with half more point than Wesley So and one more point than Leon Aronia. So now Caruana is the player who have the more options to take the tournament. So let's see how the tournament continues. Apart today, I'm going to analyze the best game of the women's section. So let's see the game if you want. Bye bye, motherfuckers.